And we're back for episode 45 of the 13 O'Clock podcast.
Yeah, what's the name of this one?
This one, we're going in another true crime direction, because you know how much I like to do true crime. We're talking about the Villisca Axe Murders, and some other things as well. Now, this was a listener request.
Okay.
Actually, I had been wanting to do the Villisca Axe murder case, but I also want to talk about, because Villisca is kind of a pretty well-known unsolved, like creepy unsolved murder. But what a lot of people don't know is that maybe, like there are some researchers that think that whoever committed the Villisca Axe murders was also responsible for a bunch of other ones, because there were a bunch of other weird axe murders in the Midwest, like right around that time, that don't get as much publicity as Villisca did, even though a lot of them are really similar. So there are some researchers that think that that all of them were perpetrated by the same person, like an axe-wielding serial killer in the Midwest.
So it's an unsolved serial killer case.
Maybe, yeah. Okay. It could be, yeah.
All right.
But okay, so before we get into that, since this is a true crime topic, as I mentioned on the show before, my next book to come out is going to be a true crime compilation. And as it happens, Villisca will be in there. And it's going to be called The Faceless Villain. It's eventually going to be 3 volumes. Yeah. But the first volume should be out before October. That's what I'm shooting for. But yes, this will be volume 1 covering from 1900 and 1960. And it's like the creepiest unsolved murders from kind of all over the world, mostly in the West, like Europe and the United States. But
yeah, it's probably going to be like a serial killer version of Unseen Hand. It's going to be pretty long, have a lot of cases in it. Yeah. And it's going to be a series. Yeah. So, people will like it. People like series and people like nonfiction. So this is, and the serial killer thing is probably bigger than even paranormal. So
yeah, it's not just serial killers. It's unsolved murders.
Unsolved murders.
Just creepy unsolved murders.
Right. So there's a big market for that.
Yeah, and I've been wanting to do a true crime book for a long time because I really like. I mean, I like all the topics we do on here, but I think the true crime ones are my favorite. Yeah,
it doesn't mean that we're stopping paranormal. We'll do that too.
Yeah, I'm taking a break to do some true crime because I've been wanting to do some.
Yeah, it'll be cool.
So, but if you're more into the paranormal, obviously my newest book, The Unseen Hand, is still out there. If you want to get a copy in print, ebook, or audiobook. Yeah. And if you like it, please leave a review. I would really appreciate it.
It's hot as hell in here right now, and I'm kind of sleepy.
Our air conditioning broke, and
the central went out.
The central went out, and we're gonna have it replaced, but we haven't had it replaced yet. So and we live in Central Florida, so
it's terrible.
Yeah,
it was insured though. It just takes time to go through the paperwork. It was a 13-year-old unit. Yeah. Man, those things.
Well, air conditioning doesn't last long in Florida.
No. We have backup units as window units. We can't run a window unit in here. We'll never get through the show.
It'll be too loud.
It'll be too loud.
So we have to
So it's like 90 degrees in here and we're dying. The new channel's almost ready. We could launch it now if we wanted to.
Yeah, I'll probably be putting it up in, sometime this week or next week.
It's going to be a list channel, and it's awesome. Yeah. So, it looks really good.
I'm going to try, I have a bundle of videos, like a small bundle of videos I can put up. I have 7 that are done, and then I have a few more written. And so I might just put those up and then start putting up one or, start putting up 1 or 2 a week, thenceforth. So yeah, that should be pretty soon. I've been working very hard on that. I think that's about all the shout outs.
That's about it.
Other than Project Entertainment Network, we always have to give them a shout out.
Yeah. Yeah, podcasts go through the roof.
Yeah.
But I don't know this case too much, so I'm just going to ride along kind of like the audience. I know you want to research this whole thing. I've never heard of it before.
Really?
But if I don't make any sense, it's just because I'm hot. You can edit it out.
He's so helpful.
Yeah, I'm going to be real helpful on this one.
He's so helpful. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, if you are, a student of true crime, or if you're interested in creepy unsolved murders, you have no doubt heard of the Villisca Axe murder case. It's one of the most famous unsolved mass murders in American history. And it happened in 1912. Now, to this day, the house where it happened is still there in Villisca, Iowa. And it is a tourist attraction. If you're into that kind of thing, you can go and you can do the whole tour, and they'll tell you all about the murders. And, if you're a ghost hunter, you can go there and see if you can talk to some of the victims or something like that.
What makes these so memorable, these murders?
Here's the thing. Well, I guess it's probably a lot of things. One, it just kind of came out of the blue. It was an entire family. It happened while they slept. There wasn't any reason, really.
Right.
and they never caught the person that did it or really had much of an idea who could have done it.
Right.
Was probably why.
How many people were in the family?
6 family members and 2 little girls that were visiting them.
Okay.
It was like a friend of one of their daughters.
And there may have been more families that were wiped out by this same person.
That's what's interesting. And probably what I'll do is I'll probably talk about Villisca before the break. And then after the break, I kind of want to get into some of the other cases because I didn't really know this because I'd heard of Villisca, but there were actually a bunch from about 1911 to about 1914. Mm-hmm. There were a bunch of other like mass axe murders with a similar kind of thing where like a whole family was taken out and they never caught the person that did it. And they were kind of far apart. Most of them were in the Midwest. A couple were in the Pacific Northwest. They're not sure if those are the same person or not. A lot of times the MO was the same.
Yeah.
And it seems kind of strange that it's not better known that it might have been a wandering serial killer because even though the towns were far apart, most of the murders happened like real close to a railroad.
Right.
So somebody could have been just like traveling around the Midwest by train and just hacking people up and getting back on a train and running off.
Well, right off the top of my head, this is before central heating and air.
Yes.
So that means that each one of these houses heated itself with a fireplace. So they're cutting firewood, most likely.
Yeah.
Which meant that there's axes around.
Yeah.
Which means that you could just walk up to a house, find the axe that they used to cut their firewood, and kill them with that axe.
Well, that's what happened in most of these cases.
So they find the axe most of the time?
They do find the axe most of the time.
And the axe belongs to the house?
And the axe belongs to the house.
There you go. Got it.
And see, that's...
Do you see what a genius I am?
Well, no, that's been mentioned before. Well, the reason that there were probably so many axe murders around this time is, like you said, it was particularly in the Midwest because it was a weapon of convenience.
Right.
Pretty much every family in the Midwest had one, and it would have been out in the yard. And also in the Midwest, really nobody locked their doors. I mean, everybody kind of knew each other. They lived in small towns and stuff like that.
Still like that in the South. You don't lock your doors in Mississippi, especially if you live in the village.
And I mean, if you were so inclined and if you were kind of into like, hey, I'm going to wipe out a whole family with an axe for no reason whatsoever, then, I mean, it would have been fairly easy to pull off back then. The fact that it was just it was so gruesome and there were like weird little details and stuff like that. But basically, okay, so this was 1912. And it was the evening of June 9th. Now, we have the Moore family. It was Josiah and Sarah. They were in their 40s. And they had 4 children. That evening, they were they were real up in the Presbyterian church, the local church, and, stuff like that. So they were at a little program that night with all their kids. And after the program was over, it was about 9 p.m., and they walked the 3 blocks back to their house. Now, the little daughter, one of their little daughters, had 2 little friends named Lena and Ina Stillinger. And they were going to come over and spend the night. It was a Sunday night. So all 8 of them go back to the house. They all have some milk and cookies. They all go to bed. Now, sometime between midnight and 5 a.m., somebody, and they think that this somebody might have been waiting for them, sitting out in their barn. Because when they went out in the barn, they found like a depression in the hay, like someone had been sitting there. And then there was like a knothole in the wall. So they were thinking that maybe somebody was sitting out in the barn, looking out into the yard, waiting for these people to come home.
Right.
And waiting for them to go to bed. So sometime between midnight and 5 a.m., somebody picked up the axe from outside, walked into their house because it wasn't locked. Now, the 2 little girls that were visiting were sleeping in a bedroom downstairs. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs. One of them had the parents. The other one was the 4 children. Whoever this person was took the axe, walked past the bedroom with the 2 visiting girls in it, walked upstairs, walked into Josiah and Sarah's bedroom, took the axe, and whacked Josiah with the flat side of it, which goes to show that they're kind of used to using an axe, because if you try to, and I don't know if there are any axe murderers out there, but if you try to hit someone with an axe with the sharp side, it'll get stuck. Right. And then the other person will wake up and be like, what are you doing? And all this other kind of stuff. So he didn't slice them or cleave them with the axe. He actually bashed them with the other side of it. Actually, whoever did this, they swung the axe so severely that there were axe gouges in the ceiling above the beds.
So he didn't hit him with the flat side of the axe. He hit him with the back of the axe.
Now, some say flat of the axe. Some say blunt side of the axe. So it could
back
be
of the axe.
So yeah, it's probably the back side.
It wasn't a two-sided axe.
Basically, what he did, he walks into the parents' bedroom, smashes the woman before they even wake up.
Okay.
Nobody else in the house wakes up either.
Well, he did it silently.
Yeah. Then he goes next door into the children's bedroom, bashes all 4 of the children.
Right.
Then he goes downstairs and bashes those 2 little girls. Now, one of those little girls they think might have woke up for a second.
Right.
Because she was scooted down farther on the bed, and her nightgown was kind of hiked up. Right. They don't know if he pulled it up or if she was trying to wriggle away from the axe. But, he got her anyway.
Or she just did that in her sleep.
Or she might have just done that in her sleep. They're not really sure. But, they said if anyone woke up, it was her, but she probably only woke up for a second. Now, there were a lot of kind of strange little details. And because this was 1912, some sources report one thing, some sources report another thing. Now, the family was not found until the next morning. And the next morning, their neighbor, who I believe her name was Mary Peckham or something like that, she looked out the window and she's like, man, that's funny. No, usually it's a farm, usually They're up early. They're out, letting out the chickens and feeding the horses and all this other kind of stuff. And she didn't see anybody. So she calls up, Josiah's brother, I think it was, and said, hey, there's nobody around. You might want to go check it out. So he goes to the house. He had a key. Now the doors were locked, which means that the killer must have locked the doors on his way out because the doors, as far as they know, had not been locked before. So he had a key. He went in there. A minute later, he comes tear-assing out of the house and he says, call the marshal. It's horrible and all this other kind of stuff. So the marshal comes, a couple doctors come, all these people come. Now, here's where it gets kind of shitty. This was 1912. It was Iowa. Everybody knew everybody. The minute everybody in town found out about this axe murder, townspeople were trooping through the house wanting to check it out.
Right.
They didn't really have a concept of we need to secure the crime scene, evidently. You know what I mean? Right. So it's they just have people, and apparently, according to some sources, one person, they don't know who it was, one townsperson took a piece of Josiah Moore's skull as a keepsake. Yeah. Like you do.
Well, in 1912, there wasn't forensic science, as you know.
Not
anyway.
really.
Didn't matter if 20 people walked through the damn house. Yeah. They wouldn't. You could give them a totally pristine crime scene and they'd screw it up.
Probably.
They didn't. They knew about fingerprints.
They had fingerprinting.
But
it was
no. There was no application for fingerprints. There wasn't a database.
Right.
And I doubt they could probably prove anything that probably wasn't even really believed in court at that time. At that time, you could probably say, "Oh, I bet you fingerprint. They're probably maybe 1 in 100 are the same." And you could probably get away with that in court.
Yeah, you probably could. It's like science and witchcraft. Right? Yeah. The same
about the same thing back then. Maybe there was no such thing as professional police departments in 1912 in the United States. Not really. Not by today's standards. The best thing would have been something along the lines of today they would be like security guards.
Yeah.
Not even. A security guard might have better training than a policeman of the time.
Yeah. But anyway, okay, so despite the sort of circus that the entire investigation was, they did manage to find out a couple of things and find a couple of things. They determined that whoever had swung the axe was probably left-handed. They determined that what the person did, the murderer, went up and killed the Moores, killed the kids, killed the other kids, and then after he did that, he went back up and made the rounds again and just smashed the shit out of everyone's heads. So they were just obliterated.
Yeah.
And he went back and did that.
I bet you because one of them woke up.
Well, no, they were all dead at that point. He killed them with a couple blows, all of them, and then went back.
I bet you one of them made it and started to...
It could be.
And come back to life, basically. And he went, oh shit, and he killed that one again.
Because
he went around and smashed them all to make sure that
you would be amazed. When I was researching the Axeman of New Orleans case, which is another kind of famous case, we might do a show about that one day. But when I was researching that for my book, you would be amazed at how many people survive an axe to the head. You'd think it would be pretty much immediately fatal, but that is not the case.
No.
A lot of the Axeman of New Orleans victims lived, actually. Yeah. And it's just unfortunate that they didn't see who hit them or they had lost their memory or whatever. But yeah, a lot of those people did survive even though they got hit in the head with an axe. But anyway.
What happened there? One of them woke up.
But yeah, it might have. But they think that the person went all around the house again, did the rounds again, and just smashed their heads into nothing. There was just nothing left. They were unrecognizable. Another interesting thing he had done was that he had taken a lamp from the house and he had taken the chimney off and put it under a chair. And then he had taken the little wick and he'd bent it in half. Mm-hmm. And they think this was because he wanted the house to be illuminated enough for him to see what he was doing, but not bright enough that, that they would wake up or that someone from the outside would see him.
All right.
There were a couple other weird things. All of the victims their heads had been covered. He smashed all their heads and then Josiah and Sarah, he actually pulled the bedclothes up over their heads. The children, he took pieces of clothing and draped them over their heads. Right. And same thing with the little girls downstairs. Another weird thing he did was that he went around the house, because he hung out in there for a while, evidently, after he killed everybody. And he got like aprons and dresses and things like that. And he covered up all the windows and all the mirrors. So they don't know if that was, I mean, I can see covering up the windows, but the mirrors, that seems a little like a weird superstition type of thing.
Maybe he felt weird walking around inside of a darkened house, dead bodies in there, and
seeing himself.
Seeing his own reflection in
Now,
there
used to be, and I think we mentioned this on our superstition show, that there was a common superstition that if you looked into a mirror where there were dead people present, you would see the ghost of the dead person or what have, or their soul would be trapped in it or something like that. So maybe it was a superstitious
I think this is a young guy.
It may be, yeah. Another strange thing, they found the axe was still there, and it was Josiah's axe that had been picked up from outside. Now, here was the weirdest thing. In one of the bedrooms where the two visiting little girls were, they found part of a broken keychain, which apparently did not belong to the Moore family. And then they also found a 2-pound slab of bacon, which had been wrapped in a towel and was left leaned against the wall. This may seem like kind of an odd detail, although I did see one source that said that it could have been used as a quote-unquote masturbatory aid.
I think it's unreal.
I mean, I could see that. I can't really think of any other reason why they would leave a slab of bacon in the bedroom.
Maybe he's going to take it.
Maybe, but he left it there, like leaning on the wall, like deliberately leaning against the wall, like he left it there. So I don't know what that was for.
Right.
It's probably also significant that, now they're not sure if either of the two little girls was sexually assaulted, but the older one, who was 12, the one who looked like she had woken up and her nightgown was hiked up. Now, some sources say that her underpants were found underneath the bed. But none of the sources say that they could determine if she was sexually assaulted. So I don't know if she was, and if they just didn't have any way of determining that. I mean, I'm sure they did have a way of determining that, but I don't know if they just didn't want to report it because it was 1912. I don't know. So they're not sure. You know, most sources I said, well, she could have been, but they don't know. It's not really clear. You know, which if she had been, then maybe that would explain the bacon there. Maybe he was jerking it into the bacon. I don't know. Weird. They also found a bowl of bloody water, which presumably the killer had used to clean his hands off. Okay, so the first thing, obviously robbery, not a motive. Nothing was taken other than the house keys, which the murderer used to lock up the house after he left. Like I said, this is a fucking small town in Iowa. Everybody knows everybody. Who the hell could have done that? Now, the first person that they suspected was a man who lived locally, and he was also an Iowa state senator. His name was Frank Jones. The reason they think that, the reason they think that he might have had a motive was because Josiah Moore used to work for him. He had like a farm equipment company. Now, Josiah Moore used to work for him. He worked for him for like 5 years, 7 years, something like that. Evidently, the two had a falling out. Josiah had quit, and he had set up his own competing business and had taken Frank's most valuable client, who was John Deere, along with him. It's said that in town, the two men hated each other so much that one of them, if they saw one another on the street, they would cross the road to avoid each other. There were also rumors that Josiah had an affair with Frank Jones's daughter-in-law, although that was never really proved, but that was the rumor anyway. So some people in town said, oh yeah, those two guys hated each other. Now, Frank Jones, like I said, he was a senator. He was kind of an old man, like oldish. He was 57 in 1912, and they don't think that he was actually the person that swung the axe. They think he might have hired somebody. Now, the person they think he might have hired was named William Blackie Mansfield. Now, the reason they think they might have hired him was because he was not a real savory character. And actually, one of the cases I'm going to describe in the second half, which happened in Blue Island, Illinois, was actually Mansfield's family. And he did kill them. He was convicted of it. But that was his own family. That's not usually a serial killer thing, where it's like, oh, and he did it for financial gain. But anyway, so they think that some people thought that Frank Jones might have hired this Blackie Mansfield person to kill the Moores because of this grudge that was between them, allegedly. Like I said, there's not a huge amount of evidence, but some people did think that. And the fact, too, that Frank Jones was a Methodist and the Moores were Presbyterians kind of caused this huge, religious strife, in the town. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like, Presbyterians against Methodists and all this other kind of stuff. So now people who thought that maybe it was somebody else, there was another suspect, and his name was Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly. Now, he was an English immigrant.
Lynn George
Jacqueline Kelly.
So just first names.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was an English immigrant, and he was a little preacher, a Presbyterian. Now, he was a little bitty guy, only 5'2", about 119 pounds.
All right.
Just a little bitty fella. And he was kind of a wandering preacher. Now, he was in Villisca the night of the murders. He had been at the same Presbyterian little get-together that the Moore family had been at. He was also a known sexual deviant, as they would have said back in the day. He was a peeper.
All right.
He had been caught in Villisca 2 nights before peeping into windows. He had been known to, in other towns where he lived, to run ads wanting secretaries who would type in the nude. That type of thing. Yeah, so like I said, he was a peeper, stuff like that. Whether he was an axe murderer, I don't know. They said now he was left-handed, like the murderer was, but he was awful little to be, swinging an axes around. Now, another thing that was kind of damning about him was that he actually left Villisca on the 5 a.m. train right after the people were murdered. And he admitted that. He said, yeah, I caught a train at 5 a.m. from Villisca and went somewhere else. And he admitted that he had been on that train. An elderly couple who had been on the same train as him, they claimed that Kelly had told them there was a murder in Villisca. And they claimed that he told them this at 5:15 a.m., which was 2 hours before the bodies were discovered. Which, if that was the case, would be very damning.
Right.
However, now Kelly was indicted years later. It was 1917. And in this, it came to light. Now, he actually confessed, but then recanted, the next day. He's like, yeah, I totally did it. And he's like, no, never mind. I was just kidding. Now, the elderly couple that said that he had said that there was a murder there, they changed their story. They reversed their testimony. It was also kind of fishy that he apparently sent some bloody clothes anonymously to a dry cleaner in a neighboring town, a few days after the murder. Oh, and also he came back to Villisca a week after the murders, and he said that he was in Scotland Yard and he wanted to tour the murder house. So they let him tour the house because they didn't really know who he was at that time.
That sounds like something a guy would do. They want to revisit the crime scene.
Yeah, maybe. So even though he confessed and all this other stuff, but he recanted it. The elderly people recanted their story. And then all the other stuff was kind of not clear. Now, he was indicted. The first time, it was a hung jury. Uh-huh. Now, so they convened a second one, and the second one let him go. So apparently, there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. And, so that
sounds like it was him.
It does kind of. Yeah. But I don't know. He seemed like a pervert, like a weird, creepy pervert and stuff like that, but...
And he wasn't from the town.
No.
That fits the MO.
Yeah.
Somebody just blows into town, kills, and then takes off.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, it could be. Apparently there wasn't enough evidence there to indict him. And the weird thing, too, is that even though to me he seems like a fairly likely suspect, the fact that there were so many of these other axe murders, which I'm going to get into after the break, and the fact that nobody thought to maybe pin them on him, maybe he was doing, check his movements.
Right.
To see if he was in the same town as these people. I don't know if anyone ever did that or not. Maybe he had alibis for the other ones. And like I said, maybe all of these axe murders that took place in the Midwest at this time period weren't the same person, even though some of them kind of really do sound like the same person. I mean, I think. Yeah, so...
We're at the halfway mark.
Yeah, so when we get back, because I think I covered most of the details in the Villisca case. Now, when we get back, I want to talk about the serial killer theory and how there were these kind of other crimes going on at the same time that had some kind of similarities. And some of the cases that are thrown in with it, the similarities are actually exaggerated, so they think they maybe weren't part of the series. But some of them actually do sound like it was probably the same perpetrator. So we're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Every person's story has something to teach us. How others view life, how obstacles are overcome, how joy is felt, how fears are faced, how love is expressed. The Matters of Faith podcast explores individual stories of people's lives and how faith plays a part. It may not be your story, but it may help shape yours.
The Matters of Faith podcast with Jay Wilburn is on Project Entertainment Network.
Subculture Corsets and Clothing is our favorite store for unusual clothing, shoes, and accessories. They offer a wide selection of men's and women's clothing at great prices. Subculture also offers a cool selection of shoes and accessories. Steampunk, gothic apparel, retro, corsets, and so much more at Subculture Corsets and Clothing. Check out Subculture online at subculturecorsets.com. That's subculturecorsets.com. Make sure you use the discount code 13o'clock for a 10% discount. Subculturecorsets.com or visit their store in Jacksonville, Florida, just off I-95.
Armcast, Dead Sexy Podcasts. I'm your host, Armand Rosamilia. Fridays exclusively on Project Entertainment Network, where I interview authors, publishers, editors, artists, filmmakers, narrators, the lady from Walmart, whoever I feel like talking to. That's every Friday, Armcast, right here on Project Entertainment Network.
Okay, and we're back. Talking about the Villisca Axe Murders and the possibility that there was maybe an axe-murdering serial killer wandering around in the Midwest in the early 20th century. So the theory that the Villisca Axe Murders were committed by a serial killer was actually put forward in 1913, only a year after the murders. And this was put forward by a guy named Special Agent Matthew McClaughry, and he was in the kind of forerunner of the FBI back then. Now, he thought that whoever committed the Villisca crimes had also committed about 6 other crimes that had gone on around the same time. And now, this was before Villisca. There were some after Villisca, too. The first one in the series, well, the first thing I have to say is that according to McClaughry, his theory, he thought that all of these murders were committed by a guy named Henry Lee Moore. Now, there are a lot of reasons to think that maybe that wasn't him. I'm not saying that these weren't all committed by a serial killer. I think they probably were, but I don't think Henry Lee Moore is who it was. That's who McClaughry thought it was. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The first crime in the series actually happened in Colorado Springs, and this was in September of 1911, which, that was quite a while before because Villisca was in early June 1912. Now, in Colorado Springs, this was a family of 6. Similar kind of thing. The only person not killed was the father, Arthur Burnham, because he had tuberculosis. He had actually moved his whole family to Colorado Springs so he could stay at, one of those sanatoriums for his illness. And his family lived in a little house in town. Now, he was at the sanatorium and his family was at their house. Now, a neighbor thought that she hadn't heard, like a friend of the wife, whose name was Alice, she hadn't heard from the wife in a while and she got worried. Actually, this was her sister, not her friend, sorry. So she went to check on the family. And then she found Alice and the Burnhams' 2 children hacked to death with an axe. Another weird thing, now this was only 3 people, but then some people said, we haven't seen their neighbors for a while either. So they went into the neighbor's house, which was Henry F. Wayne and his wife, and they had a baby daughter. So they go into the Wayne house, and those people had all been axed to death too. Now, the Burnhams and the Waynes were friends. The Burnhams, Arthur Burnham had actually told Henry Wayne, hey, come out here, there's a house for sale next door to me. So somebody had busted in and killed both these families. Now, Arthur Burnham, the father of the first family, was still alive because he'd been at the sanatorium. Right. So obviously, suspicion immediately fell on him. However, he had actually been working at the sanatorium, which was 12 miles away from the house. And he had an alibi because his roommate, he had slept there, and his roommate said, his coughing kept me up all night and stuff like that. And there was no way to get from the sanatorium to his house without walking. It was 12 miles. He had tuberculosis very badly and could barely breathe. So they said there was no way that he could have walked 12 miles, much less swung an axe and killed 6 people. So he was pretty much let off with that. There were a couple other suspects. There was, like an Italian immigrant named Tony Donatel, and he was supposedly friends with the wife and stuff, but that kind of didn't go anywhere anyway. So there was another 6 people hacked to death in Colorado Springs. And McClary thinks that this was the first in the serial killer's, line of killings. A couple weeks later, on September 30th, 1911, there was another one. This was in Monmouth, Illinois. This was, the guy was William Dawson. He was a janitor of the First Presbyterian Church, which is interesting because also another Presbyterian connection there. And he was actually supposed to come and open up the church for Sunday services. He didn't show up. So, neighbors went to check it out. Now, so him, his wife, and his teenage daughter were dead in their home. Skulls crushed by a heavy object. The house was not locked. Blinds were all drawn. Nothing inside was touched. Everybody was just dead. Nothing was missing. Now, this case was interesting because it wasn't an axe. Police got bloodhounds out there and stuff like that. They actually found a bloody pipe. So someone had beaten them to death with a pipe, but it was otherwise kind of the same MO. So like I said, it wasn't necessarily, the guy was an axe murderer. He was just using whatever was around, maybe. Because, like I said, it was a weapon of convenience. A big deal was made of the fact that when they searched the property, they found a flashlight, and it had the words Colorado Springs scratched into it, which seemed kind of weird because there had been another murder at Colorado Springs. So that's kind of the first thing that caused them to link those two crimes, besides the fact that they were only a few days apart. Some people were accused of this. It was like a Swedish immigrant, a black guy named Loving Mitchell, stuff like that. But like I said, nothing really went anywhere with that one either. Little more than 2 weeks later, Ellsworth, Kansas. October 15th, 1911. Now this was the Showman family, and it was the same kind of thing. It was a little farming community in Kansas. Same kind of thing. Neighbor got worried, hadn't heard from him, called the house, no answer, and went to the house, and the door was open, and found William Showman, his wife Pauline, and their 3 children, all dead. Also bludgeoned to death with an axe, and the axe had been taken from the neighbor's yard. This also happened on a Sunday night, just like the Villisca crimes had. They found the axe on the property. It had kind of been washed off, but it still had a little bit of blood over it. Now, an interesting thing about this, which kind of ties it to the Villisca crime, was that whoever did it had taken an article of clothing and covered up the telephone, of all things.
Didn't want that telephone looking at them.
Yeah. So
maybe how today everybody's upset that their phones are watching them.
Yeah.
And their smart TVs are watching them. Maybe there was a conspiracy theory, and it's true, those things are watching you. Maybe not the way you think you are. But maybe there was a conspiracy theory back in those days that a phone could listen to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that's what it was.
Well, maybe, like I said, if this was the same person that did the Villisca one that covered up the mirrors and stuff like that, I mean, doesn't that seem like the same kind of thing? Like, it seems like a paranoid person. It's like, they're watching me, they're listening, they can see me.
Yeah.
So he covered up the telephone.
Yeah.
Now, significantly also, just like in Villisca, they found a lamp with the chimney taken off and put under a chair and the wick bent in half, just like at Villisca. Kind of weird. So I'm kind of feeling like at least this one was probably the same person, even though, one was Kansas, one was Iowa. They're not that far apart. And there's
no way little dude could have done it, huh?
Oh, see, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. Right. Because to me, I mean, like I said, it was a long time ago. It was 1912. I wasn't there. Yeah. But from everything I've read, it really seems to me that little Reverend Kelly was the most likely suspect for Villisca. Just because, I mean, he seemed like a weirdo, and it's like...
And what's the chances of a weirdo being in a little town like that on the exact same day somebody killed?
Yeah. I mean, he'd been there for a few days.
He'd been there for a few days.
But, because like I said...
He left when it was over.
He left at 5 a.m., on the morning of it. That just seems very, very sketchy to me.
How big was that town? Do you know?
I don't know offhand. Not huge. It was just like a little farming town. And they said everybody knew everybody, so it couldn't have been that large.
Right.
But
I bet you it was him.
Yeah. He was like, they call it like a wandering minister. So he just went from town to town. Right. Yeah. And like I said, he sounded, now they have like copies of like newspaper ads he used to run, like looking for girls, like to come do secretarial work for him with bunny rabbit ears.
What's weird though, little perv like that, if he was the one that was doing it, you'd think that there'd be a lot more evidence for sexual misconduct with the little kids and the women.
Right. That's the only thing that kind of makes me think it's not, because like I said, he seems like a sexual, because they caught him like peeping in windows and stuff like that.
The guy who's doing this, he seems like more like a drifter who just needs a place to stay. And maybe he's going to go through, wants to feel power.
Maybe.
Over a situation.
Yeah.
I'm going to go in there and we'll wipe these people out and make that place mine for this evening. You know what I mean? I'm going to go through their shit. Then we'll leave. No one will know it's me. I'm the masked avenger. That kind of crap. I'm the shadow. Only the shadow knows.
Yeah. It might have been. It might have been something like that.
It's going to be something like that. You know?
Yeah. But, so this crime, also this Ellsworth, Kansas one, in investigation of this case, another name came up. His name was Charles Marzik. I think I'm saying that right, or Marzik. And this was actually related, tangentially related to one of the victims, Mrs. Showman. Charles Marzik was Mrs. Showman's sister's ex-husband. And he had actually been in and out of prison a few times for stealing wheat, for threatening people and stuff like that. So, they thought maybe that he could have had something to do with it, maybe. And he was actually related to a couple of the other cases too, or his name was brought up in a couple other cases too. So he's kind of another possibility. Another thing, and I think I forgot to mention this in the Villisca thing, and this was another thing that happened in a couple of these other cases. In the case of Colorado Springs, it was actually 2 neighboring houses that were murdered. In Villisca, they think that the person who killed the people at Villisca had tried to get into someone else's house earlier or later. They're not really sure. They said about 2 a.m., the woman who worked the overnight the telephone operating office, she said that she heard a door rattling, like someone was trying to get in. Mm-hmm. And then she ran to the window, looked out, and she couldn't see anybody. She saw somebody running off. So, and that happened on a couple of other occasions too, where there were, the same night that a murder took place, somebody reported, hey, someone was looking in my window, or someone tried to get in my house, or, right. I found my screen outside, somebody trying to break in or something like that. So they think that maybe he was just picking people at random and then he couldn't get in one place, so he'd run off to another place. Now, at this point, some newspapers were starting to maybe link these earlier crimes. Because keep in mind, these crimes, Colorado Springs, Ellsworth, this was before Villisca. So Villisca hadn't happened yet. Now, there was another crime, and this happened about 5 or 6 days before Villisca. This was in Paola, Kansas. This was a young man, Roland Hudson. He was 21, and he had his wife, Anna. And they had just moved to Paola, Kansas. Now, they, the wife had been fucking around and stuff like that. He had been telling people about his wife being unfaithful, blah, blah, blah. They fought all the time, all this other stuff. So neighbors said, oh, we haven't seen them in a while. A couple of neighbors go over, push open the unlocked door, find the bodies. This was kind of similar to Villisca too, where it looked like somebody had pulled the comforter up over the victims' heads. Either it looked like they'd done it before hitting them. So maybe, I don't know if they were trying to muffle the sound or something like that. There were also some speculations made that the victims might have been chloroformed before they were killed. And just like in a couple of the previous crimes, a screen had been removed, like someone had crawled in the window. Nothing was missing from the house, so not robbery. They also found a lamp, just like at Villisca and like at a couple other ones where the chimney had been removed and put under a chair. Now, significantly, like I said, this was in Paola, Kansas. This happened 5 days before the Villisca crime. And just like I was talking about before, it seemed like whoever did this crime in Paola that killed these 2 people tried to get in someone else's house earlier, because another family in Paola earlier that evening said that they had been awakened by the sound of someone knocking over a lamp downstairs. And then they ran downstairs and saw somebody running out of their house. So this seems like a person that's just going in random places and just, killing people he finds there. It doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason. Okay, so then 5 days later was the Villisca crime, which of course was in Iowa. Now, here, a few months later, it was 6 months later, in December of 1912. And this was in Columbia, Missouri. Now, this was the crime that kind of got the whole theory about Henry Lee Moore being a serial killer. Because this crime, Henry Lee Moore was actually convicted of. However, they were his family members. It was a little bit before Christmas. Henry Lee Moore came home, and his mother and grandmother lived there. And he said, I'm going to come have Christmas with you guys and stuff. Now, he claimed that he came home that morning. The door was locked, all the curtains were drawn and stuff like that. He went next door, asked the neighbor, where his mom and grandmother were. And then he broke into the house, and then he came running back out and he said, they're dead in there. When he was questioned, his story kind of fell apart. And it turned out that he had probably done it. Because he had written letters to girlfriends and stuff like that, I'm going to get their house after they're dead and all this other stuff. Although he seemed to have a much grander concept of how much the property would bring. But he thought he was going to be wealthy and all this other stuff. So he had a motive for getting them out of the way. So, and he had like all these dumb stories about, because he had bloodstains on his clothes. I had a nosebleed and all this other kind of stuff. And they're like, yeah, right. He was convicted of those 2 crimes. But, like I said, the guy in 1913, the FBI guy who thought that all these crimes were related, thought, Henry Lee Moore obviously is the one that did it. All these ones starting with Colorado Springs and Villisca. But the thing is, Henry Lee Moore couldn't have committed the Villisca crime because he had work records that showed he was like 400 miles away at the time. And usually, dudes that kill their families for financial gain, that's not usually a serial killer thing. Right. While I can see, he's an axe murderer, he's an axe murderer. We're all axe murderers. You know what I mean? It's like, that was kind of the only related thing.
So how many cases total do we have?
Now, those were 6. Now, there were a couple other ones that actually weren't part of the guy's original theory, but some people think they might have been related, although these 2 were actually in the Pacific Northwest. These ones were, the first one was in Ardenwald, which is right outside of Portland, Oregon, and that was June 8th, 1911. This was 4 victims, William Hill, his wife Ruth, and their 2 children, and they had all been killed by an axe. Now, they found bloody fingerprints on the scene, but couldn't match them to anybody. Significantly, in this case, the wife and the 5-year-old daughter had been raped.
Okay.
Which they didn't really find evidence of in the other case. Like I said, Villisca...
It sounds like a different
offender.
So
this might be a different offender, even though it was an axe murderer. And this one, actually, there were some valuables missing. So, not a lot of stuff, but a few things were missing. So that might have been a different person. All right. Even though it was an axe murderer, whole family. Other things were similar.
Can we group these into groups? I would think are there any that can be excluded?
I'm not sure. Yes, this one was, some things were taken and the woman and the girl were sexually assaulted.
Right.
But I don't think that you can discount it completely because they're not sure if that little girl in the Villisca case was sexually assaulted.
I bet you she wasn't.
I'm not entirely sure. This one...
Usually when an offender does that, he advertises the fact that he did that. Yeah. He takes the body, poses it, and positions it in a certain way to let everybody know that he did it. It's... When I look at that Villisca murder and then the other one that you mentioned that sounded exactly just like it, covered up the telephone and everything. This is somebody who sneaks in, does that, doesn't really enjoy it too much, and then tries to cover up the fact that he did it. He doesn't even want to see himself in the scene of the crime. Yeah. He covers up the mirror, all right, and then he covers up the phones so nobody can hear it.
And he covers up the victims too.
He covers up the victims so he doesn't have to see it. This is somebody who's trying to deny the fact of what he just did. He's trying to erase himself from the crime scene too. The motive is very different from a sexual predator. Yeah. If you ask me. It's almost kind of like somebody who's doing it out of necessity, which he may believe that it was necessary. He might have been hearing voices, and it was telling him to do it even though he didn't want to. That kind of stuff. Yeah, because obviously whoever did Villisca and some of these other murders, they had to have been not right, obviously, because there was no reason. They didn't take anything. Right. They don't think it was anybody that hated the people particularly or anything like that. Serial killers really, actually, if you really get down to it, a serial killer is really nothing more than a serial rapist. He just kills the victims. Yeah. That way they can't testify on it. And eventually he gets into killing the victims. That killing the victims is part of the sex. That's not what you see here. Yeah. That doesn't look like the behavior of a serial sex offender or a serial rapist. Right. More like, to me, it looks more like somebody who thinks that what he's doing is necessary. So probably some kind of, psychotic. Yeah. Somebody who's hearing voices type of deal. The devil's making him do it type of deal.
It definitely does.
Something like that.
Yeah. Now, the only other crime that kind of happened around that time was in Rainier, Washington, and that was in July 1911. And this was also 2 victims, a man and his wife, Archie Coble and his wife, and it was south of Tacoma. Now, this one, a guy was actually convicted, even though the evidence against him was kind of weak, so they don't really know if this one had to do with Villisca. Maybe not. Now, there was another one in October, actually on Halloween, 1911. This was in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. And this person didn't die. And this actually happened in broad daylight. This woman, her husband had just left for work. He got to work. And then her grown son, who also lived there, heard her yelling And the grown son rushed in there and found her across the bed and her head had been bashed in. Now, she lived. She was unconscious for a few days, but she did live. But just like in the Axeman of New Orleans case, if you want to look that one up, she could not remember what the person had looked like or anything like that. So they don't know if that was the same.
I don't think it's the same one.
It might not be.
I think the guy we're looking for targets families.
It does seem like
he's targeting a family.
Because pretty much all of the similar ones had children in the house, too.
He's being told to target these families for some reason. Maybe because they're evil, or something's telling them that they're evil. And they have to, maybe, he's saving them from their sins type of deal. You don't know. It's going to be something wacky. Yeah. I don't think it's a sexual motive. Right. Which really wouldn't make him, technically, by the FBI's criteria, a serial killer as you know it. More like a mass murderer.
Yeah. Yeah, because it doesn't have that kind of...
It doesn't have the sexual motive.
Right.
I don't think it was sexual.
Yeah, it might not have been.
If it was sexual, it would have been really sadistic, too, and there would have been a lot of signs of that, signs of torture. He would have at least humiliated the dead bodies by putting them, arranging them in a certain way, so when people came to find them, it was kind of humiliating or scary.
Like you said...
He's trying to hide the fact that it happened.
Yeah, like you said, the thing about the Villisca crime and the other ones...
Like he's ashamed of it.
Yeah, there was definitely a sense of shame involved. Yeah. Like he was trying, like you said...
Shame of himself, so he's going to cover the mirrors.
He was trying not to be seen. He was trying not to see himself while he was doing it and things like that. It was almost like he was trying to keep it a secret. Like
most serial killers are into it, you know what I mean? The gore and the butchery is part of the sexual experience. Yeah. They're not going to hide it.
Yeah, that definitely... I mean, other than the savagery of like bashing these people's heads into pulp...
Right.
But like you said, he might have just done that to make sure they were dead, or make sure
make sure that they wouldn't wake up suffering. You're looking. You have to look at it from a twisted point of view. You know what I mean? Well, I already hit them. I may as well kill them. And if I'm gonna kill them, I'll make sure they're really dead. I don't want them to get up. You know what I mean? Wounded and be staggering around. Suffering like that. I'm gonna put them out. Put them out quick. Yeah. And then I'm gonna hide the fact that this happened. I don't want to see it. I don't want anybody else to see it. The authorities can see it, but I don't want anybody else to see it. That type of deal. Yeah. This is somebody who's got shame. Oh, and I don't want to look at myself after this. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that telephone's listening to me. I'm going to cover that up. Yeah. I don't want them to hear it.
That creeped me out. That and the bacon creeped me out more than anything. If that was the same person. It's
I don't think that this whole masturbating with the bacon, they would have known, because the bacon would have been awful slimy. Well, yeah. All right. So I don't believe that. I think probably what he had planned to do is to take the bacon with him, and he forgot it.
Yeah, it might have been.
Because, the bacon was probably fresh, and he goes, boy, that'd be good to eat. And if he's a guy...
It's like, hey, you don't want that to go to waste.
Yeah, and if he's a guy on the road, then, you know what I mean? Yeah, true. He might have been a little bit hungry. Yeah. Or, planning ahead.
Though axe murder and whole families wears you out. Gives you an appetite, I guess.
If it's like salted bacon, it can survive without refrigeration for quite a while, depending on, how hot it is outside.
Yeah, true.
So you might be able to carry that around for a couple of days,
Yeah. I had actually never thought of the masturbatory thing until I read it, like in one source that somebody said, oh, maybe that's what it was for. But because no one else could figure out why it was there. No,
he was going to eat it.
Or why it was left there. Yeah, maybe he did. Right. In all the excitement.
They didn't really have refrigeration then. They had ice boxes.
Yeah, I know.
And he probably saw that in the ice box and he goes, well, that's going to go to waste. No, I'm going to take it with me.
Yeah, they won't need it.
Then he forgot to take it. Or he changed his mind. He's like, nah, I don't want to take that with me. That's removing something from the crime scene.
Yeah, maybe he thought it was cursed or something.
Well, no, it's just that maybe it can be proven that, I sold him that bacon, that kind of deal. So he says, I'm going to take it.
Yeah. Maybe he thought better of it.
He thought better of it.
But anyway, so the last crime, and remember I mentioned William Blackie Mansfield before, that some people thought that Frank Jones, the Iowa senator, had hired Blackie Mansfield to murder the Villisca, the family in Villisca. Now, actually, there was a crime in Blue Island, Illinois, which was July 6th, 1914, and that was Blackie Mansfield. Yeah. But they were family members. Right. Again. So they don't really... It could be, but maybe not. And like I said, it's so long ago, I don't know if anyone's going to ever solve it now. But I definitely think... from everything I've read, I definitely think at least some of those crimes that McClary pointed out were probably the same person.
Yeah. But I don't think it was that preacher.
Yeah. He seemed, like I said, he seemed like a weirdo, and he seemed kind of like a fairly likely suspect, but I don't know. You'd think that if they really thought, it could be him, that they would have checked his movements for the other crimes too, and I don't know if anybody ever did that.
If it was him, those crimes would have looked a lot more sexual. Yeah. And these crimes don't.
Because he did just seem like a perv.
Because he was a perv. Yeah. All right. So that wasn't him, I don't think.
Yeah, maybe
this
not.
This is some kind of a homeless wanderer. jumping railroad tracks, jumping train tracks, walking around. You know, he's hearing voices. He's not real mentally healthy. He's hungry. He's got to have someplace to sleep. He sees a family there, you know what I mean? Maybe he feels jealousy, you know, about the family or something of the voices tell him to wipe that family out, you know. God's going to allow him to sleep there tonight type of deal. It's going to be something like that.
Yeah, I bet it is.
And then he just wanders off to the next one. And eventually he gets killed for something else, so you don't ever know what he is.
Yeah.
He makes a wrong move.
Or he gets put in prison for something else.
He gets put in prison, or he goes to a hobo camp and runs his mouth, or does the wrong thing and some hobos kill him. You know, you don't know.
Yeah.
Probably something like a hobo.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that then in the early 1900s.
Yeah. A lot of axe murders too. I was really surprised when I started researching this book, because I knew about Villisca, but I didn't know about all these other ones that were likewise unsolved.
Yeah. I also have a feeling though that he was moving at night. I think he was walking around at night. Nighttime was a different thing back in 1912.
Well, yeah,
there weren't any street lights. Yeah. There weren't many cars, and actually 1912, yeah, there were some cars, but it not out there. Wouldn't have mattered.
Well, yeah, it's not like now. It's like, you know.
Yeah, it's not like now where you're walking down a country road at night and there's cars going with headlights everywhere. You know, no, it's not. It wasn't like that. So yeah. I think he just moved at night and probably slept in the woods during the day. You know, maybe it was semi-nocturnal, something like that.
Yeah.
Just a wanderer.
Yeah.
1912 was damn near the Wild West. There was still Wild West shit going on at that time.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was
out in California.
That was more than 100 years ago when you think about it.
Yeah, that's all I'm talking about. I'm saying, boy, it's hot in here, man.
It really is hot in here, yeah. Well, now I have to stay in here and finish editing all the stuff.
For you.
I know, it sucks. Okay, that'll do it for this episode. If you enjoyed this topic, then be sure to pick up my book, The Faceless Villain, when it comes out, because I talk about Villisca in there and talk a little bit about a couple of the other crimes, too, in that section. And I'm sure you will probably enjoy it, because, you know, true crime. I like true crime. You like true crime. We all like true crime. And if you like our show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, or, you know, go over and listen to some of the other podcasts too on Project Entertainment Network, because I'm sure they would appreciate it. There's a bunch of other cool podcasts on there. Also go to www.zazzle.com/13o'clock and buy some of our t-shirts, because they're pretty rad. And I guess that'll probably do it for episode 45. Bye.
Attack when you're partially nude or you're taking a bath.